my punishment movie for not having watched The Lost Daughter last week, which was a audience recommendation. I have finally gotten around to it, and this episode is delayed. Obviously, we were going to be going live with our Batman thoughts, but that will be rolled into this week. But I mumble, I bumble. I have not introduced the talent for the show. Mr. Travis Croft, how are you, sir?
I am fine and dandy. Very good to be back on the air. I apologize to our listeners or viewers, if you or both.
Yeah.
We had it's both our faults really. I very rudely decided to go off and get some dental surgery. I needed been waiting to have done for about a year, which because of COVID it kept getting delayed. And then I had tickets to the Gig of Doom. The Gig of Doom. I bought tickets to a gig in February 2020 to see Stone Temple Pilots, Bush, and Live. If you're old enough to remember them, you'll like the shirt this week. And then that got getting delayed. It got a bit delayed about 4 or cancelled or rescheduled about 4 times. And I think the person I was going with changed about 5 times. So, and I was like, I don't believe this gig is ever actually going to happen. But it did. And yet it actually happened. It didn't happen with Live. They were replaced with Cheap Trick, which was a very odd musical combination. Okay. So about 10, 15 years before the rest of the bands. But that happened. And then last week, someone had the temerity of making George work outside of regular business hours. So, and you know, we're all about the money on this show. I've always been, and I can speak for my co-host here, we've always been passionate about not starving to death. So
it's a weird stance, I know, ladies and gentlemen, but that's just the line in the sand that we've drawn.
That's just how I roll. So and that's how you. So we are back. Excuses are made. We are probably going to be a little late on the Batman review, but hopefully I don't know about you, but I am very curious to hear what my co-host thought of it. And I am desperately curious to hear what he made of Australian film royalty, the pirate movie. It was shot here in Melbourne on the world famous Hollywood side. So you know that's something to look forward to.
Yeah. But on the plus side, with the show being delayed, hopefully those who are very sensitive to spoilers, we can talk a little bit more spoiler
openly. I think it's fair now. It's been out for almost a month. You haven't seen it. Every man and his dog's seen it. Like I think who wanted to see it.
Now, shall we start, as we have been traditionally doing for a while, with our chain movie?
Let's
do it. So I picked this week's chain movie a couple of weeks ago. We followed on from Thief, which was Travis's last pick, the Michael Mann kind of. It was his first feature film, wasn't it?
I think it was.
Yeah, and the connective tissue was the one and only Tangerine Dream, who did the soundtrack, and they did the soundtrack for Near Dark as well. So what is Near Dark, you may ask? It is the 1987 Catherine Bigelow directed vampire movie, though they never actually say that they are vampires. And this is her first movie solo as a director. And it's very much, this is a time when I think she was actually dating Jim Cameron at the time. And Jim Cameron had just finished rapping on his Aliens movie. And
Joe Blow did a nice video of this, and he said they were friends. James Cameron. So were they friends? Were they dating? Don't really know. But sorry to interrupt. We just don't want to misdiagnose their relationship. We could get a cease and desist.
That is fair.
James lives in New Zealand. James Cameron lives in New Zealand. He can easily fly over here and beat the shit out of us.
It's true.
And I would be okay with that, as long as we could film it.
Yeah.
Let's consider that an open invitation, James.
Just which one of us would he want to slap? That's the thing. Double. Yeah. But going back onto my point, there's a lot of crossover with the cast and crew from Aliens to this. It was almost like a copy and paste of production team to help bring Near Dark to reality.
Which came as a suggestion from James Cameron, apparently, to Catherine Bigelow, that, hey, you know, I work with these guys and, you know, they were great. And, you know, So, I mean, that's a pretty good recommendation considering what James has been up to in recent years.
Yeah. So what is Near Dark? It's I'm going to use slightly not the beefiest out of the three, but written by Keith Lowe, giving you the respect right there, Keith. A Midwestern farm boy reluctantly becomes a member of the undead when a girl he meets turns out to be part of a band of southern vampires who roam the highways in stolen cars. Part of his initiation includes a bloody assault on a hick bar. That's pretty much it. And his inner outer war of deciding if he's going to stay with this unusual new family or try and go back to his living family, shall we say. It's got a cast of people that you will definitely know. Two of the big ones, you've got Lance Henriksen and Bill Paxton as the leader and associate psychopathic member of the undead vampire clan. You have got Lance Henriksen's Jesse's partner, Diamondback, Jeanette Goldstein, and then the other member of the pirate. It's already on my mind. See, I've not been able to forget the pirate movie. The other member of the undead team is played by Jenny Wright, played May. The titular Texas cowboy is a very young Adrian Pasdar that most people will probably know from his time as Nathan Petrelli on Heroes.
He's an awfully long time ago now. That show is 14, 15 years old now.
That's just weird.
Kind of crazy that was that long ago.
Yeah.
I've had this described as a vampire western.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to look at it. I should start out by saying I didn't like this film at all. I was bored shitless.
So was
all the way through it. It did have some of Catherine Bigelow's sort of trademark skill for shooting action. I should also apologize to our audience today. As part of my dental surgery, I am still recovering. I actually still missing some teeth. That will hopefully be resolved for next week. So if any of you are thinking, my goodness, he sounds a bit different this week, and he can't pronounce his S's, and if the word sashimi comes up, it's a difficult one to pronounce. I will apologize in advance. I may not be quite as clear as I will be in future. Sorry. But some of the action, she shoots action very well. And you can see that in, like we talked about Strange Days last year sometime, I think, and that's a wonderful, strange film, but the action she shoots really well. Yeah. And you go to something like Zero Dark 30 as well.
There's always this level of visceral, kind of raw footage of her action. It always looks kind of grainy and rough and hard every time.
And it's realistic almost in a way. It's similar to Cameron's in a way. So you can see what would have been, as I recall, he wrote Strange Days, or sort of wrote it. Like,
or it's an idea or something, yeah.
Either way, this film does have some interesting ideas in here. Like, I really enjoyed the way that when vampires are in, you will call them vampires for want of a better term, in the sunlight, and that's really actually presented as the only effective way of killing them is sunlight. There's no stakes or silver bullets or garlic or crosses or anything of holy water, or anything like that. So when they are in sunlight, you can actually start to see the smoke coming off them, like they start to actually boil almost. What's the smoke? Is it steam? I don't know. But it's actually a really cool visual. And I've never seen that done in a film before or since. And I thought that was a really interesting way of sort of getting a visual representation of a danger that character was in.
So often in the movies like that, it's just instant flame.
It's like, oh my god, I'm burning,
like, and having that little moment of the steam just coming off it. I wonder if I don't know how they did it, but I would assume they kind of maybe like had all the blankets and clothing in a freezer that they then just chucked over, so it was literally just steam coming off so that they could film them pre-flame. But you're right, it looked cool and it looked different to what we've been presented before and since, honestly.
You're right. It's almost, and adds an interesting element to the vampires in the sense they are not instantly dead, but instantly paralyzed by fire and pain the moment they're in sunlight. It actually gives them a little bit of more flexibility in that sense of is a particular scene where one of the characters needs to throw a blanket over his head and run to a car to to try and evade the police. I don't think we need to give a spoiler warning. It came out 40 years ago, but that was an interesting angle on the characters, and I liked that.
Yes.
Where the film, I think, really falls down for me is the cast is actually really, really good and solid, except for where it really, really counts, which is the leads, who are awful.
Yeah.
Adrian Pazza, I had no idea who this guy was. I looked him up and like, oh, I vaguely remember the guy from Heroes, but like he seems to specialize in B grade schlock for the most part for the last 15 years, really. I mean, okay, Agents of Shield, maybe not quite B grade, but he doesn't pop up in a whole lot of. There's a lot of voice work by him. There's a lot of Iron Man voicing, which is interesting. But at least this is early in his career, and he certainly is. And Jenny Wright as May, who also doesn't have much of a resume, I found their characters the weakest characters in the ensemble, and the actors playing them very, very weak in the ensemble. I mean, and part of that may be, as you noted, the core of them, Paxton, Henriksen, and Goldstein, had just come off playing in Aliens, including Paxton and Goldstein in particular, were playing both Marines. And I recall that Cameron actually did a lot of work to try and make them feel like a cohesive unit. And I guess Henriksen was shacked up with him in that, playing the android Bishop. So those three guys, maybe, I'm guessing, had some kind of relationship and certainly experienced acting off each other. And that core of the gang really works particularly well when you have these two blow-ins who just don't seem to fit in. May's, as May the vampire's motivation, I struggle with. Like, why was she out, like, turning people into vampires? Like, it doesn't seem to be their modus operandi as vampires is to go out and start creating more, because it's kind of a big deal when she meets Caleb in a bar or something, and they kind of hang out. She ends up biting him. He becomes a vampire. He drags it back to the brood, or whatever you want to call it. And they're not real happy about that. They're wanting to kill him until they figure, oh, he's one of us. And they're like, oh, he's got a week to prove he's one of us before we'll kill him. And, so I was a bit like, well, why did you do that to him? Like, I mean, either kill him or don't. Like, why would you just have...
I mean, they do...
Their love story is deeply unconvincing.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Before Caleb gets turned into a vampire, he's sort of like... I think he's presented as this very naive young man who has got the looks, but he's not necessarily got the brains or the social standing to be the pretty boy or the one that everyone wants. So him and his two other friends that we briefly meet, they're kind of joshing each other about, oh, look at that girl and stuff like that. And then he just randomly meets May and takes her for a drive, and he's very needy. And he just keeps on persuading her, and it's like, okay, sure, fine. But at the same time, she was giving off this like, no, I can't do anything. But there wasn't, it was almost that element of, it's going to sound really weird. And maybe you've had the luck of never having to watch the Twilight movies, but
I have not.
in the first movie, there's that element of Edward Cullen, Robert Pattinson's character is very kind of pushing away of Bella because he knows what it means, because he knows the truth. He's a vampire and she's not, and it's dangerous and blah, 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 blah. Even in that steaming pile of poo, they do it better than they do in this. And granted, both the lead actors in the Twilight movies have gone on to actually have interesting performances and interesting careers. These two, it's debatable whether they have, and they certainly don't have the talenting chops to pull that off. And it's just thrown into more stark contrast when you get these tiny little nuggets of the relationship between the rest of the brood, and like the little bits of conversation about Lance Henrik's character Jesse being around in the Confederate Army and stuff, and Severin, Bill Paxton's character, just the way that he is and how he is like they've actually thought about this rich, deep lore for their character, and that's interesting. And you are serving me this like unwanted romance story? No, come on. You know which story's better here. You do.
I thought Bill Paxton was far and away the standout in the cast. His character was far the most interesting character in the film. The conflict between him, Severin, and Caleb, the most interesting relationship in the film. As I sort of hinted at before, the budding relationship or romance between he and May, deeply unconvincing and poorly handled. I thought, like, it's just sort of they're in love, they're falling in love. And it's basically just telling us that without actually showing us why or any convincing scenes about why this woman is interested in Caleb at all. Caleb's a very uninteresting character, but the tension between him and Severin and the crazy nature of Bill Paxton's Severin, especially in the scene where they take down the hillbilly bar, is the highlight of the film. And I mean, look, it's not a stretch for Bill. He's kind of playing the same character he played in Aliens to a degree, just through a different lens. The kind of wise cracking, but not a coward, I guess, in this film, but not a world away from what he did in Aliens. So I think, like, why wasn't he in more of a film? Like, you're shooting this, like, this is way better than everything else. And surprisingly, I thought Lance Henriksen's character was really underdeveloped. Like you sort of said, he had this whole backstory he developed for his own character, but like sort of like, I guess maybe budgetary considerations. We didn't really have a lot of screen time. And as I sort of said, that the Severin Caleb conflict sort of seems to take main stage, and he's just sort of there.
Yeah. And considering he's the Jesse's supposed to be the one who's been kind of ruling this brood for hundreds of years at this point, apparently, he's very forgiving, all things considered. He seems to know the risks of, the potential of having a new vampire brought into the brood, but then at the same time, he's very willing to just massacre an entire pub. And he's also willing to give this new guy, who is obviously struggling with this taking life thing, a whole week to just figure it out. It's weird.
The other part of the story that kind of really bothered me was I guess the B story to the A story. The A story being Caleb being, trying to find his way as a vampire in this brood, is his father and younger sister, I guess it is, trying to find him after he's kidnapped by the vampires. And they just so happen to all be in the same hotel together, at some point. And
because reasons.
because the story needs it to happen. The character we haven't talked a lot about here is Homer, which is actually a mildly interesting idea because I don't know how often it had been done before this. In that Homer is an old man in a young man's body. So he's basically an old man trapped in the body of a child. So he's been turned into a vampire as a young boy, and he's now, I guess, insinuated he, like the others, is a couple of 100 years old. If not older, and everybody in the world just assumes that he is a 10-year-old boy. That's interesting because we saw it done later on as being Kirsten Dunst in Interview with a Vampire. And in a different way, more recently in the Eternals, with the annoying
Sprite.
I don't want to remember their names; they were terrible. The small girl character who goes to school at the end. Sorry, I'm not going very good. I hated that film. This is the first time I can recall it being done. So he bumps into Caleb Colton's younger sister Sarah at the Coke machine at the same hotel, and that sort of draws, and he becomes obsessed with her, and that sort of draws his dad Loy into the situation. That's where we see one of her slightly cooler scenes where he shoots Jesse and he spits a bullet out and gives it back to him or something like that.
Sorry,
this was a couple of weeks ago I watched this. And it's just it's very convenient of all the hotels in whatever fucking state they're in.
Yeah.
And they're at the same hotel, and they just happen to bump into them. And the resolution with Loy using a blood transfusion to de-vampire a vampire, again, a fairly original idea. I can't say I've seen that done before in a vampire story.
I mean, it's kind of what they toy with, something similar in Blade, but to not to the curing effect. It's more to stave off you. In that you can't cure vampirism, but you can kind of stave off the worse effects, that sort of stuff. But yeah, again, it's a cool, interesting, innovative new concept for vampirism. And I think it actually part of it does lead into maybe what they were trying to suggest with all of the vampires is they're all really needy, actually. Like Homer is really desperate for that genuine childhood connection. Like he screams, "No, she's mine," and things like that when they try and take Sarah away from him. And Severin is very possessive about his brood, and so like, "This is mine, fuck you." And then he has that weird thing with the boot dangly things, whatever they call them, the spurs. And Jesse is kind of, it's alluded that Jesse is possessive and protective of his team. And then on the other side of it, you've got May, who they seem to suggest that she is somewhat jealous of Caleb's human life, which is why she's happy at the end when she gets the cure. But it's an unfulfilled idea, if that is the idea, and I may very well be reading too much into that.
No, you're right. It wasn't quite there. I mean, it seems like a collection of half-formed ideas. I found the end very underwhelming as well, to the point where I honestly can't even remember what happened. So,
well, they all die.
Well, there you go. I mean, pretty much. Yeah, the only other interesting sort of thing I noted about the film was it reminded me somewhat of From Dusk Till Dawn, especially the hillbilly bar fight scene. And look, it's completely on brand for Quentin Tarantino to steal or lift scenes entirely from other films. He's lifted entire film titles from other films and reused them for himself.
The difference, though, I think, is like From Dusk Till Dawn is just unabashed fun, and it knows the tone that it is trying to set throughout. And this movie tries to set a very serious tone, and this is a horror movie, but it's not actually that gruesome, for one thing, and it's not actually that scary, and it's just, it doesn't hit the points that it needs to get there. It feels kind of like a student movie.
A little bit. It's her first foray into it, and look, I'll pay that. It's better than my first film because it never happened.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I see a lot of people. I mean, Joe Blow, I said, who I'm quite a fan of on YouTube, who actually kind of ripped off some of that material. They were following.
They consistently rip off that material. They're amazing.
But they called it one of the best horror films you've never heard of. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
It's a bit different. There's some interesting ideas there. But look, honestly, if you want an interesting vampire film, I would not necessarily recommend this. I'm trying to remember. It was an Australian one made about 10, 15 years ago, which was had Ethan Hawke in it, which is, I'm just going to have a look for the name.
Oh, yeah.
Daywalkers or
Daywalkers? Yeah. With Willem Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe was in it as well.
Yeah.
It's I will find the Daybreakers. It's called
Daybreakers,
2009, by the Spearig brothers, who are Australians, and had Sam Neill in it as well. If you, I don't know how easy it is to find these days, but if you're looking for an interesting vampire film with a slightly different twist on it, I would go with Daybreakers over Near Dark any day of the week. I feel like this film's just got a reputation it has because A, Catherine Bigelow, Academy Award winner. B, half the cast of Aliens a year after Aliens.
Yeah.
That kind of feels like where it seems to be getting its rep from. And you combine that with a couple of slightly different ideas, the Western angle on a vampire film, slightly original.
For those who are interested, Daybreakers is available in Australia on Stan.
Highly recommended. I enjoyed it immensely. This one, not so much.
Yeah.
It was interesting, but it really did. You're right. It felt like it was a training film.
Yeah. And a couple of years after this, she made Point Break. So, everyone starts somewhere. And like we said, the action in this is good. The bar fight is actually cool, even though it's kind of simple, but it still works well for the theme. And the kind of raid on the motel where they escape in the van and stuff like that, that's actually pretty cool. And it feels claustrophobic, and it feels like a threat to these vampires who could just be happily shot. But then when the walls are literally being peppered with sunlight coming through, suddenly there's this genuine extra level there. So it's
the same idea Tarantino used again in From Dusk Till Dawn, where they were at the end of the film, Juliette Lewis and Clooney shoot holes in the wall, and we have the disco ball, which was so. I haven't heard Quentin talk about this film, but it would not surprise me for a second if it was one of his kind of films he enjoyed and to steal ideas from. But it's full of ideas done more interestingly or done better in other films. I just struggled to give a crap. I mean, it would have been more interesting if I gave a crap about the characters at the center of the plot. Because I didn't care about May or Caleb, and I found their acting really cheesy and really amateurish from those two performers. I just didn't care. And it's hard to really appreciate anything else that's going on if you don't care about the main story.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Absolutely. So the keys are to you, sir. You have keys.
And I've been preparing for this one for a while now.
Okay.
And I realized that we needed to go back, and we talk a lot on the show about superhero films. And I realized we kind of skipped over one that was, I think one of the primordial progenitors of the world of superhero films that we know today, or comic book films, shall we say.
Okay.
And I am going to be using the connecting tissue is a gentleman named Bundy Chinook.
Bundy Chinook.
I am stretching a friendship here. That Bundy Chinook, for those who don't know, and let's face it, most do, was the set medic on Near Dark. I mean, when it comes to set medics, I think he's very much the Laurent Olivier of set medics. There aren't many who go close to Bundy Chinook.
Okay.
You sound unconvinced, sir.
I feel like this is teetering right on a line where you need a penalty movie, sir. This is dangerously close.
I didn't make the rules. Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yes, you did.
But no, I am going to take us back to 1996 to the Dark Horse Comics adaptation, Barbed Wire. Because I've never seen it. Inspired by the Pammy and Tommy series of late on Disney Plus.
Barbed Wire.
So for those who don't know the cinematic masterpiece that is Barbed Wire, now I got to watch this one too, by the way. So we're both doing it. It is the Pamela Anderson vehicle. Based on the Dark Horse comic book series. During the Second American Civil War in 2017, Barbed Wire owns a nightclub called the Hammerhead. Things become complicated when her ex-lover, Axel Hood, who is married to the fugitive Corinna Devonshire, re-enters her life. I don't know the only other real name you're going to know in here is the one, the only, the incomparable Xander Berkeley, who just pops up in the most interesting places.
He has some interesting choices, yeah.
Speaking of, he was in Terminator 2.
Yeah.
I don't know any of the other actors in this, but
wait, who plays Axel Hood?
Nobody knows. I don't think
Yes, it is Mr. Boba Fett himself, Temuera Morrison.
Temuera Morrison, there you go. What an interesting cast.
Yeah.
So, of course, this is really all about Pamela Anderson, and she was supposed to go on to be a big star after this.
Mm-hmm.
You can guess about how that worked out for her.
Mm-hmm.
So, Pamela Anderson Lee, and as she was at the time.
Mm-hmm. You're mean to me.
This could be good. I don't know.
It's not supposed to be good. Don't be silly. It's got a 3.4, 40% Metascore.
Every now and again, you come across something and you're like, you know what? This is a lot better. That last one had a 7 almost, a 6.9 near dark.
That's true.
And it wasn't. I would call that about a 4 or a 5. So, you know, it could be awful, but it could be brilliantly awful.
But it is, Barbed Wire is rated on Metascore. It's twice as good as my torture movie, which is the pirate movie.
Can we hear about the pirate movie now?
Sure, why not? Let's do that. Let's do that, because fuck you, and I'm getting this over with.
This is a popular choice, this one. I've had people asking me about this.
So the pirate movie is from 1982. And it's a parody homage to Gilbert and Sullivan's Pirates of Penzance. The pirate movie is a comedy musical utilizing both new songs and parodies from the original, as well as references to popular films of the time, including Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark. In your typical boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy fights girl with swords plot, the story revolves around Mabel, the youngest of Major General Stanley's many daughters, and Frederick, an ex-pirate of Penzance. They fall in love and proceed to retrieve the Stanley's fortune from the pirates stolen 20 years ago. The Pirate King informs Frederick that since he was a leap year baby born on February 29th, Frederick is still technically the king's apprentice. Frederick must then decide between duty and honor, the only good qualities the king taught him, and true love.
Wow.
Yep.
So, any particularly memorable songs you'd like to give us a bit of a rendition of?
No.
You sure about that? I mean, how can I live without it? Sure. Actions? I mean, it was number 71 on the Billboard Hot 100. I mean, I don't understand how that didn't stick in your head.
Well, you see this pen? It saved my life by me driving it into my skull. This is... I mean, come on. When your song is called Happy Endings, that shit needs to be parodied in modern society, for one thing. Stand Up and Sing, performed by Kool and the Gang. It's bad. It's so woefully bad. The closest that I can get to this movie for anyone. And, okay, so in Australia, did you ever get the Carry On movies?
Look, I don't think they're as big here as they were in the UK, but I am aware of them.
Okay. So this is a little bit Carry On because it's that parody of a popular genre of the time, mixed with elements of... There is a kind of Spaceballsian kind of feel to it, because unlike in Spaceballs, where they genuinely have kind of fourth wall breaks and literally a whole thing of them watching a video of the movie and the franchising and all
a talented cast, a talented writer director,
all of that
funny
stuff.
Jokes, no songs.
This tries desperately, and it's like, as the blurb that I just read out says, there are references to Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark in there, and they are woeful. They are not funny. They are just bad. Everything about it it's like Pirates of Penzance is terrible. And so doing a parody of it maybe you could salvage it and maybe you could save it and turn it into something good. But no. And okay, so maybe they can just do a parody of General Pirate. Oh no, they're not going to do that either. Everyone's supposed to be like, okay, so the Pirate King is played by Ted Hamilton, and there's weird scenes where he is kind of trying to seduce Mabel, and he's clearly like twice her age. And then there's also the just everything about it is just wrong. The only marginally funny thing about it is Bill Kerr, who plays Major General Stanley. And there's this one, it's the first time where it's a rendition of I Am a Modern Major General. And it's almost funny, but at the same time, it's just not. This obviously this movie is not made for me because it's a musical. It doesn't involve Nazis and swearing, and it's just bad. And I really hate you. There is not a single saving grace for this. It is just bizarre in every conceivable way. It is outdated, outmoded. It looks the look of it kind of looks like a cheap Caddyshack for the first part, and then it goes into this fantasy thing where they're all in costumes and they're genuine pirates and they're not just replicating. They're legitimate pirates on the seas and all of this stuff. And it's like, okay, no, just when will this finish? Oh, I've only watched 6 minutes of it. Oh no.
I enjoyed the tagline for the film, "The Ultimate Spoof." It's like the ultimate spoof with a question mark, and I'm like, that doesn't inspire great confidence. If you've got to call yourself that,
Yeah.
put a exclamation mark at the end.
Yeah.
This was the most expensive film ever filmed in Australia at this point in time, on a budget of $9 million in the early 80s. Says something about the Australian film industry.
Yeah.
And there are some very familiar names in here. Gary McDonald's in here. I see Rhonda Birchmore here. Rhonda Birchmore is a singer. Gary McDonald, very, 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 very famous Australian TV performer and sometimes film star. So you should see them. And of course, it was shot, as I said earlier, on the Hollywood side, which is a tourist attraction here in Melbourne.
How could I miss Jell Nilsson, who played Blaster of Master Blaster from Mad Max? He was a pirate in this. How did I not see his greatness?
Well, it was only made a year or two after that. So, this guy's there's not a lot of working actors of that kind of stature in Australia. So good for him. Look, I'd never heard of this film until it was brought to my attention by my partner, Michelle, who's a big fan.
Clearly hates me.
Big fan's probably a strong word. She has a complicated relationship with this, which she would explain significantly better than me, other than the fact that she was living in a foreign country at the time, and this was one of the few pieces of English language Australian cinema that she had on a VHS tape. And I always say, back when I was young, you had very limited access to cinema. Like, you had what you had on your VHS tapes. They were expensive. They were hard to find. So you kind of learned to love what you had. And so she knows this film hilariously, word for word. So I will be, and there is no doubt about it, I will be subjected to this at some point in time in my life. So
good.
Had to do somebody else first.
Hope you are taped down to the seat and Clockwork Oranged.
Yeah. Well. Like I said, I'll get mine in time on this one, but I'll just continue to avoid it for the time being. I just have no idea how. Like I said, the highest budget film ever made in Australia in the 80s, in my lifetime, and I was young, but in my lifetime, and I have never heard of this film.
And you know what? There's another element to this. This kind of feels like they looked at the success of Greece and thought, we could do that for pirates. We could totally do a pirates thing of that, because it's these two young lovebirds that have a lot of songs together, a la Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta, but they're not as charismatic as those two, and they aren't as skilled as those two in the, skills required in a musical, which is singing, acting, dancing. So it just fails.
Interestingly, this has got some interesting people involved in it. So this film was written by an Australian, Trevor Ferrant.
Okay.
Not a name that rings off my top of my tongue as someone I'm aware of, but if you look at his IMDb page, he was involved with some very well-known Australian comedy shows. Fast Forward, well before your time, was a sketch comedy show. Hugely popular and influential in the late 80s, early 90s. Jerry Connolly show, slightly less so. Backburner, again, a very popular show. The Gillies Report, again, a very popular satirical Australian comedy show. So all after the pirate movie, it should be noted. So interesting to see, written by an Australian, how it ended up with a largely international cast. And the director is a guy named Ken Anakin, who I'm not familiar with really, but he directed, amongst other things, The Longest Day, Battle of the Bulge, The Swiss Family Robinson. So that's quite a bit of an all-rounder, this guy. For the record, The Longest Day is a fucking great movie. If you haven't seen it, if you like war movies, I mean, and here he is in his later career directing absolute dreck like this in Australia. I mean, the man got around. There must have been an interesting story behind this film being made. I bet someone has it, and goodness me, I wish they'd written it down.
Well, I think that is going to be a far more interesting story than the movie itself.
I will take your word for it until I am forced to find out for myself.
I hope you choke.
Wow, you won't forget film requests next time. Like if we we don't get many requests from the audience, so
there's no guarantee on that. But speaking on that, we do have another guest request, and that is by Siren Divine. She has requested that we watch the Thomas the Tank Engine movie. And this is the original version of the Thomas the Tank Engine movie.
I didn't know there was one.
Yes.
Is this separate to the TV show?
It is. I'm not sure which one this is, actually. I'll have to get back to them and find out more details.
If you can send us a link and give me a good fucking reason why I would do that. Why does she hate you?
Oh, it's not that she hates me. I mean, that's she's met me, so she hates me. But it's because of how dark the Thomas the Tank Engine things actually are. Prime example, there is an episode where one of the engines gets scared by a thunderstorm and hides in a tunnel. And the Fat Controller goes along and tries to coax them out. It says it's scared, so the Fat Controller bricks up the train and leaves it in there.
Yeah.
That's pretty fucked up.
I'm waiting for a good reason why anyone would be interested in seeing this who's not 12, but okay. It doesn't seem to be a movie, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I will get elaboration on that one, so we're okay.
If it's a TV show, I can probably sit through an episode or two, but like a 90-minute film seems cruel and unusual. I mean, next thing you know, you're going to have people going, "We want you to watch the Peppa Pig movie if there is one." And you know, I guess you do get to draw a line somewhere at a film request. Like, you know, if you give us a good reason for it, if you want us to watch The Room, for example, I don't think you need to give one. But like,
well, hi, Mark.
If you want us to watch, you know, the Emoji Movie or something, and like, well, I'm going to need some sort of. You can justify your case.
Yes, that's fair.
Usually people give us a reason. Like
Mm.
our friend who recommended The Beast to you a couple of years ago actually gave us
Yeah.
a wonderful explanation and rundown about
Mm.
why he thought that was such a great film, and he was kind of right. And A Lost Daughter again, that was an interesting
Mhm.
story. Didn't
Yep.
win on Monday. Didn't
No.
win.
Mhm. But
Nothing.
I'm actually going to put a stipulation down here. I don't think we should give the Oscars any airtime.
Probably not. Other than to say that I have seen the Best Picture winner now.
Mhm.
If we have time to
That
talk
was
about it
Coda?
tonight,
Yes.
Coda, we
Mhm.
will, but I don't know that we do. But
Mm.
we'll keep moving then. Do we want to take
Mm.
an early
Yeah,
sponsor
let's do
break?
that. Yeah.
And then we can come back and we can talk a little bit about the new Pixar film, maybe.
Mhm. And the Batman.
Now, let's go for Batman Pixar first. How's that sound? Just to whet your appetites, people.
Yeah, there you go, ladies and gentlemen.
So,
So who are our sponsors this week?
our sponsor this week are the Australian Christian Television Association and the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Australia. So, I just thought y'all need some religion, so hopefully this works. They used to put TV commercials on when I was a kid, and remarkably difficult to find.
An awkward situation is never far away. It just might save the day if you lend a hand. Do you need a hand? Do you need a hand? Be the first to say, do you need a hand? A little act of kindness never goes astray. So why not find a way to lend a hand? Do you need a hand? Do you need a hand? Be the first to say, do you need a hand? If you see some trouble coming, don't look the other way. Get right in and say, do you need a hand? Do you need a hand? Do you need a hand? Step right up and say, do you need a hand? In this big old city, isn't it a pity we don't say g'day, g'day, we'll say g'day. When you get to heaven, what do you think you'll say?
I think he would say g'day. Because he's like this.
You'll say g'day.
When Helen Macy, I went to North Daisy and I like to make a gift of it to you. You say you love me, I bet the stars above me and I say
G'day,
g'day to you. Say that you are homely, I know you're trying to stone me, so I just came around to say g'day. There's a heaven up above, you'll be up and high above. When you get there from me, just say g'day.
when you get to heaven, what do you think you'll say?
Love grows 1 by 1, 2 by 2, and 4 by 4. Love grows round like a circle and comes back knocking at your front door. Note by note we make a song, voice by voice we sing it. Choir by choir we feel like the world
I felt people owed me something, so I took it. I was angry and bitter, hated everyone, until I found the reality of God through someone I met and realised that all I ever wanted was love. Since Jesus came into my life, he's taken away the anger and bitterness and replaced it with love and compassion. I'm Alan Davies. We can all experience God's love and his forgiveness.
I'm ending that right there. Oh my God, that was... Ooh, that was a wholesome pill to swallow.
Now, if you're looking for Jesus, we can help you find him. Just need to PayPal us $25 and we'll get back to you in time. If I survive Thomas the Tank Engine and the Magic Railroad.
So this one is from 2000 with Alec Baldwin. And I've got it here. So Thomas the Tank Engine's feature film debut follows Thomas and Mr. Conductor, played by Alec Baldwin, as they cross between the real world and the fictional island of Sordo in an attempt to recover lost gold dust. Now, this is available on Prime Video.
Good for you. I wasn't going to spend a whole lot of time looking for the thing, but oh, God.
This is your penance for that terrible connective tissue on Chain Movie, sir.
Hey, look, I just was curious about it. Like, you know, we're not always watching cinematic masterpieces. Sometimes you got to go get down and dirty and see some of his shit.
That's right. Siren Divine has no regrets.
Yeah, well, this has got a 4.2 and a 19 Metascore. So this is the same Metascore as the pirate movie.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I'm willing to do it. 25 minutes. We're never getting of our lives back. Maybe I'll just.
Yeah, I've already done that.
Yeah. You had an hour 38. That film's longer.
Exactly. You're still getting off light.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think.
I think I might have to locate some party favors to get through this piece of junk.
I think if you do find the party favors, that might actually help.
Excuse me. Interesting, Siren Divine. That is a very similar sort of backstory to pirate movie. My partner Michelle really liked. Well, it was important to her, shall we say, when it was young. Whether she liked it or not is a different story. But I appreciate you giving us your reasoning. That I think fits the criteria. We'll take a look at it if we. This is going to be.
I'm enjoying watching you squirm, sir.
And children's films. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you made me watch a musical.
Yeah. Hey, I didn't make you watch a musical. You made you watch a musical.
I said that I was willing to accept a punishment.
I would accept a punishment if I fucked up too. So if I forget
you're the one who went nuclear.
If I forget to watch Thomas and the Magic Railroad, you have carte blanche to go hard. And I am certain you would have something stored up for me, so don't worry about that. But
actually, I don't, because I'm a nice person.
I would be disappointed in you if you didn't.
Now, let's get on and talk about The Batman. Yes. So, The Batman. This is the much curioed relaunching of the Batman franchise post Zack Snyder, and as seems to be pretty standard for most of the times they cast Batman, curiosity around Robert Pattinson, Mr. Sparkly Vampire Man himself, being Bruce Wayne the Batman, and having Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman in a 3-hour movie. This had a lot of interesting things going into it.
It did. And I think you and I were talking before the film came out that, but especially about that runtime, that like this is the longest Batman film to date.
Yeah.
And I think I said you need to have something pretty special. Forgive me now. Have a fucking cracking story that is utterly flawless. That need to justify a 3-hour runtime in a superhero film. Endgame got it because it was the end of,
It
25
was
films.
all
or whatever it
payoff.
was. And it was also a spectacularly good film for what it was.
Hmm.
It did everything it wanted to do perfectly, but it had a massive advantage. This film does not do that. This film is not perfect. It is not a fucking cracking story if it needed 3 hours to tell it. It is passable at best. What did you think of it?
I liked it, but it only just earned the 3-hour runtime. This, if they want to do this type of storytelling for Batman, I'm all for it, but it's not. It has no place in the cinema. This should be a mini series, and if they do this kind of thing, and if they went, you know what? Yes, we are going to invest slow, methodical time into telling a detective Batman movie, which this tries to be, then the next logical step from here, in my mind, would be or an adaptation of The Long Halloween, which would be phenomenal. But that is a movie that genuinely you probably need 4 hours, 5 hours to tell it in the right way. And it is very much a detective Batman story, which is great because so often you don't actually get Batman being the world's greatest detective in the movies. And you get a little bit of that here.
It's kind of piss weak, though. It's pretty piss weak.
Everything is kind of weak.
You just got to hand it to him. Here you go. Here's a clue. Here's a solution to that clue. Actually, here's a solution that you didn't think was a solution because you thought, he doesn't actually do any detecting.
He really doesn't. He's incidental to the story in many ways, and it's only because the Riddler is his own worst enemy, which is kind of par for the course of the Riddler, because he has this compulsion to be the smartest person, and therefore he over explains in certain ways. But
should we give him a synopsis of a plot? I mean, just in case you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
When the Riddler, a sadistic serial killer, begins murdering key political figures in Gotham, Batman is forced to investigate the city's hidden corruption and question his family's involvement. So, as you noted, Mr. Sparkley playing Batman, Zoe Kravitz playing Selena Kyle, aka Catwoman, Colin Farrell playing the Penguin, Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon, Paul Dano as the Riddler, John Turturro in here as Falcone, the gangster, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
We have
Andy Serkis as Alfred.
Andy Serkis is criminally underused as 5 minutes of screen time.
Now let's just put it right there. They've assembled a pretty damn strong cast, and Colin Farrell is basically unrecognizable as Oz proto Penguin. Paul Dano, I think, is actually really interesting as the Riddler, but at the same time, it's the same thing with every Batman movie. Batman is the most boring element of this story.
He is. The villains there are solid. I think Paul Dano was very good. I enjoyed the characterization of the Riddler, the way they kind of used the Zodiac Killer as kind of the inspiration for his character and him as a serial killer, as opposed to the kind of wacky, zany Jim Carrey version, which kind of made sense in the 90s, but not so much now. Colin Farrell was really good as Oz, the proto-penguin, as you said, but kind of out of place with not much to do in the actual story and not much influence other than looking and sounding really cool. Yeah. I think they're talking about him getting his own TV show now.
Yeah. And the car chase that involves Penguin, completely unnecessary. They put that in there because they realized, we've got a Batman movie and we haven't done enough action. And if they cut that whole thing out, it was cool, but unnecessary.
John Turturro, I struggled with. He's a fine actor, but I'm also watching Severance at the moment, which is a sort of a weird dystopian comedy kind of thing.
Ben Stiller one you talked about,
Ben Stiller, it's good. And John Turturro plays this kind of wacky character who's having his sort of proto-homosexual affair with Christopher Walken in it, which is brilliant. But he's kind of this goofy kind of character in that. Like now I'm being asked to watch him and make him this sort of, sinister gangster figure. And he just doesn't give me sinister feelings. Like, you know, I feel like he's comic relief. He's, you know, I don't know. I didn't really buy him as the gangster figure here, the evil gangster figure here. Jeffrey Wright is Jeffrey Wright. He's always solid, but unremarkable. I mean, there's some cool scenes. Zoe Kravitz was okay, but kind of doesn't really have a lot to do as Catwoman. And Robert Pattinson, I guess, is the real question here. Everyone was very curious about. You sort of noted, this is the tradition. So we had Keaton, and everyone. I remember Tim Burton saying the internet lost its mind about him being cast as Batman, and the internet didn't exist yet.
Yeah, because Keaton was known for comedy,
and it was a complete genius move. And then we had, of course, Batfleck, and people were very sorry. I mean, I don't remember there being a lot of consternation about Kilmer and Clooney, really.
It's true. True.
I guess it was like, I mean, they kind of made sense because Val Kilmer was a big star. George Clooney was coming off the back of ER and From Dusk Till Dawn. And I remember thinking, cool, he's a great actor. He'll be really good. He wasn't.
Nipples.
I don't remember there being a lot of consternation again about the Christian Bale casting. Like,
people at that point, he wasn't as big of a name as he is now. And he, like a lot of people, kind of knew Christian Bale as American Psycho or that kid from Empire of the Sun.
Yeah, he wasn't a big. I think it was generally acknowledged he was a fine actor. So, but I mean, maybe people were just kind of cynical about superhero films at that point in time and didn't care anymore. Like, but you're right about Batfleck. Batfleck was really a controversial choice, and in the end, I mean, I'm Team Batfleck. Like, he deserved his own movie. This was going to be his movie until he decided he didn't want to do it anymore. He deserved a proper standalone Batman movie. And then maybe if they'd done that instead of Batman v Superman, who knows what could have happened. I think he was fine. He was good in that he was hamstrung in the Justice League film. He was better in everybody was better in the extended cut. But unfortunate timing for him. So Pattinson was controversial. I didn't really dig his performance a lot. I kind of thought he was fine as Batman. He was a dreadful Bruce Wayne. He kind of came across as pretty whiny, a whiny kind of teenage. I know he's supposed to be playing a younger version. He was very whiny and, oh, you know, my mom doesn't get me. Like, it's not a phase, mom. I'm like, you know, like I'm just really depressed, you know, like he was a fucking emo kid. Is what he reminded me of, which is kind of what he played, as I understand it, in the Twilight film. So I don't understand why his performance has been as lauded as it is, because I thought it was very average.
I thought, again, I absolutely agree. He was fine, which is the problem. He should be great. And there is still, I think Ben Affleck, for all the faults of Batman v Superman, was the best at actually balancing Bruce Wayne and Batman, because you actually got an interesting scene where he was able to be just Bruce Wayne at the at Lex Luthor's party, and he was schmoozing with other people and talking and being the persona of Bruce Wayne. And then when he was Batman, he was Batman. And Michael Keaton was great as Batman, and
he was a good Bruce Wayne as well. I think back to the scene where he finds Vicky Vale and the other guy talking about the king of wicked people, and he goes, "It's Japanese." And he goes, "How do you know?" Because I bought it in Japan. I thought he was a good Bruce Wayne.
It was pretty good.
But I just didn't buy him as some sort of like rich, you know, trust fund kid, which is what he is. You know, like he came across as a whiny teenager to me in his Bruce Wayne persona, which is kind of half the battle. And you sort of, and you just said, generally speaking, the Batman films are about the villain, so it's fine that we all wiped that again this time. But I just didn't really. There's the villains. I don't think they stuck the landing on the villains. What did you think of the third act? So we're jumping around here a little bit. Here we have, as we sort of noted in the synopsis, Paul Dano's Riddler is killing political figures in the city, hinting at Bruce Wayne's family being involved in some sort of high-level corruption. And the third act gets pretty wild with I guess, sort of militia members.
Yeah.
Sort of, first of all, blowing up the seawall and then flooding the city, and then militia members trying to shoot the mayor. And
For me, this movie reeks of too much setup. Like, it's an unfinished Bruce Wayne persona. It's an unfinished young Batman persona. It's not actually the Penguin yet. It's the Riddler is kind of the closest to being a fully formed version of themselves that we've seen in print or screen before. Zoe Kravitz's character is kind of there, but not really. And then the teaser right at the end with Barry Keoghan playing unseen Arkham prisoner. No one is developed, and this movie is all about setting everything up. There's going to be the spin-off TV show with Colin Farrell as Penguin. There's going to be a GCPD thing, apparently. And the way that they set up, the way that they end this movie, they say, oh, martial law is in place in Gotham. It's like, holy fuck, they've gone straight into No Man's Land? No Man's Land is a big fucking story, which is really deep, and you cannot tell that in 1, 2, or 3 movies. That is a series. There's a lot of shit that goes on there, and it's interesting because it goes into a lot of the political and kind of gang warfare kind of ethics of a divided, ruthless Gotham. But at the same time, you have barely even set the groundwork for our hero. Why are we going to fucking care? They're doing too much. They're rushing into this.
Which is what they do at DC, like they did with Superman and Batman, like they did with Justice League. They
haven't learned anything except put a veneer of prestige on it. And that is the biggest sin of this movie.
People like it. It's got an 8.4 rating on IMDb. It's got a 72 Metascore. It's topped the box office, which is not hard because there's nothing else out to see at the moment. So it's made. I assume, I don't know what its actual take has been, but I assume it's been pretty good. But so people are enjoying it. So
which is a dangerous precedent because
I'm in the minority on this one in the sense that and again, my partner Michelle and I, we went and saw it. We both she hated it. I actually hated it. I think I'm fair to say. She'll tell me if I'm wrong. But like, I just kind of like, I was like, oh, is that it? Like 2/3 of the way through, I was like, yeah, okay. See you stick the landing, guys, and I'll be on board. But they did the opposite. Like they just went, we don't know what to do. We'll just have a big shootout where Batman beats the shit out of people, and then we have that scene of him carrying the mayor out of the water, the flooded Gotham, the Madison Square Garden stand-in, and like with a light behind him as some sort of Christ figure, and you're like, I usually do that as a joke, obviously, but they really did, and I was like, oh, fuck off, film. Like,
see, it sets a dangerous precedent because it means that the average movie length now is over 2.5 hours. It's like, fuck that shit.
I saw a story this week.
An hour and 40 minutes max.
Bring back, if you're going to do that, you got to bring back the intermission.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's fair. And no one's going to want to do that.
$674 million worldwide currently, which is good. Just to give you an idea of the weekly take, so that came in second last week at the box office in the US, taking 20 million.
Sorry,
it's been out about a month.
I'm getting knocks at the door with Archimedes needing to go out, so I will return momentarily. But please talk.
I will keep talking. So it's still not a lot of stuff coming out at the cinema lately, I'm guessing, both here in the United States. So I think that's probably helping this film stay at the top of its box office, and as I said, taking 674 million worldwide. Just by comparison, the last big superhero film we had, Spider-Man: No Way Home, it's taken. I just get that up for you now. A lot more than 674 million. I can tell you about right now. Taken 1.8 billion worldwide. Now that's over a period of about 3 months. So it's got a little bit longer, but I don't know that Batman's going to make that kind of money. So I don't know what it cost. I mean, that's going to be the real question here. I think it wouldn't have been a cheap movie to make. So depending on what it costs, it will really give you an idea about what.
Considering it got shut down by COVID like twice, I think that the production costs are going to be pretty sky high.
I'm guessing it looked like a $250 million picture.
Probably.
Budget, the Google will say 185 to 200 million. So it's safely in the profitable realm now. Usually would double it as what you would need. I mean, I don't work in cinema, but that's what you usually say. But you want to make at least 400 to 500 million before you start making money on it.
But then
So
comparing it to Spider-Man, which recently just went up 800 million domestic.
Over $1 billion domestically and 1.88 billion globally.
See, Warner Brothers and DC frothing at the mouth of that.
I don't see the Batman getting close to that, but this is also a different kind of story. It's not as accessible as Spider-Man. It's a darker story. Obviously we all know that Barry Keoghan is the Joker. Did you see the deleted scene that they dropped last week?
I did. I rather liked it as a scene. Batman and Joker via Clarice Starling and Hannibal Lecter, but there's a very big reason why it's deleted, because it's unfucking necessary, like many scenes in the movie, and they could have easily cut that movie down to 2 hours 30.
Easily could have been a 2 hours 30-minute film, and I think I don't understand who these people are that think it longer is better. It's not. A tighter story really can help the film. There's whole chunks of that film that could have easily been removed and we wouldn't have lost anything. Stick it on the fucking DVD. Put out a director's version like you did with Justice League got a special edition. You know, not even a fucking Snyder version like before. So Batman vs Superman, I think, got an extended edition that people really dug and a lot of people saw it. It gives you scope to re-release it later on for all the people who are nerds and really want to see all the extra garbage. It's really annoying. You should really have to earn a 3-hour runtime. And I'm sorry, I'm going back to that again. I found that irritating. What do you make of? They haven't actually confirmed that Barry Keoghan will play the Joker in a subsequent film.
I am so fucking sick and tired of seeing the Joker in movies. Leave him alone. Batman has got one hell of a rogues gallery of villains, and they keep spewing out the same fucking ones. This rendition of the Riddler is an interesting one, and overall, I think is kind of a success. But you didn't need to show me Penguin, because you just didn't. He was unnecessary in this movie, realistically. Carmine Falcone was kind of unnecessary to this as well. I would love to see a realistic variation on Poison Ivy if they want to bring back one that they've already done, or fucking anyone, frankly. Don't show me Joker.
Well, I mean, they're in this to make money. So, you put Joker on a film, you're going to make money because he's such a popular character. Yeah,
but at the same time, the way that Joker is being presented, especially in this the cut scene, is like not really the kind of face that you're going to put on a bag or a t-shirt. So merchandising is not really going to be in it for this time. At least Heath Ledger's still had the color and things like that, and it was Heath Ledger who was an established, well-known, respected actor, and Barry hasn't done much that's really gotten him into the limelight, so he hasn't got that big of a fan base. And having a mutilated, brutalized face, it's like having Sloth from the Goonies. It's just not going to sell t-shirts.
Don't give him ideas. They'll do a Sloth spin-off film. They will. They'll do it.
I recently rewatched Goonies. Still fucking awesome.
Wow. Richard Donner, Steven Spielberg. It's, how could you go wrong? Yeah, so it sounds like a pretty mediocre film. You liked it a bit more than me, I think. I was pretty lukewarm on this, and I'm struggling. I feel like people give Batman a pass on a lot of things they wouldn't give a pass on something else. Like, people love Batman so much, and I love Batman so much. He's probably my favorite superhero. But he gets a pass in this film for a lot of shit that, for a very average story, a very average film. And it would get a higher score from me if it was a more audience-friendly 2 hours 20, 2 hours 30. You go say at the start, you're going to give me 3 hours to bars up here, guys, and you didn't come close to clearing it for me. I'm sorry.
And I don't really care. It's good that we didn't actually see the fucking death of his parents again. We don't need to see that. That was good. So well done. Nice. Well done. But if they're really rushing to get towards this no man's land story, sure. But you don't need all of their other setup. Like, we are shown in a very long, quite well done montage of the effects the Batman has had on Gotham City within his first year in the opening, where he's like, oh no, my symbol puts fear into them. It's like, that's actually quite a cool concept. But speed it up for one thing. You didn't need to spend fucking ages. Like, it felt like 45 minutes of just him just going, my presence is known across the whole city when the light goes on, and blah 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 blah, whatever it is he says. It's like, okay, yep, 2 minutes. That's all you need. Give me a montage. And if they're going to do that, then why not just go, okay, you know what? We're going to set up a Gotham which is already in martial law. Just have a brief, like, opening montage where it's sort of like, Gotham's in chaos, gang warfare, mysterious vigilante comes in, and then we cut into the movie and just have it established. It's like, yep, that's the world, deal with it, move on.
I'd be down with that.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But one of the things that I've read here is that apparently Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne is partially inspired by Kurt Cobain. Matt Reeves was listening to Nirvana when he wrote the first act of Pattinson in mind. That's when it came to me, rather than Bruce Wayne, the Playboy version we've seen before. There's another version who had gone through a great tragedy and became a recluse. Kurt Cobain had a relationship with fame where being famous was not his goal. He loved music, and the idea of being famous in music was a double-edged sword with him. And that made me think of Robert Pattinson, actually, because Rob is a very private person himself and loves acting, but doesn't necessarily like the part of his job where he gets recognized by everyone in public. Look, I'll pay that. It's a different interpretation.
Yep.
It's a thoroughly shitty interpretation of Bruce Wayne for me. I fucking love Nirvana, but I don't think Kurt Cobain's a superhero is an idea that's ever occurred to me. And, fair. I'm not a creative person like Matt Reeves is, but that sounds like thoroughly shitty idea to me. And it was thoroughly shitty on the screen for me. So I hope they decide to park. And if I had to hear something in the way one more time throughout the film, fucking hell, like I fucking love that song. It's a great song. I'm a big fan of Nirvana. But what? Can you get somebody who actually can write a score that's not just repeating the same thing over and over again?
It's something like the score itself, the musical score that Michael Giacchino actually created, is actually pretty good. But yeah, they keep on reusing that, and they actually have a scene where Bruce Wayne is listening to it on the radio. So like, okay, that was your one time that you have it. You could have it in the trailer, and if you really wanted it, have it once in the movie, that's it. But you don't fucking repeat it. You don't need to. Is that the theme that you want for the Batman? No, you don't. Come on.
I have a lot of problems with this film. It was not the worst Batman film I've ever seen. It wasn't the worst Batman film this century.
Nope.
Was it better than the Snyder films? Yes. But even Batman versus Superman had that. I'm going to say it again. I've said it a million times. The warehouse fight.
So good.
Just go and look at that. That's the film we wanted. That's what we wanted. What the best Batman products this century, aside from the cartoons, which I've not seen, but I know people say they do recommend them very highly, are the Batman Arkham Asylum games.
Yep.
And
100%.
that is what I want in a Batman movie. Like, that's the cool thing about those games is you feel like you get to do both. You get to feel like a detective, and you get to feel like a fucking badass who can take on a million thugs at once. And avoid getting shot and hit at the same time. And they're terrified of you. Now obviously that's a lot to do in one film, but if you distill that essence, and Snyder did that to his credit in that
Mhm.
warehouse scene where Batman takes out a room full of goons without being seen, pretty much.
Mhm.
And you're like, fuck, yes.
Mhm.
That was why I was excited to see Batfleck
Yeah.
in the film of his own.
I will pay that the fight sequences with Batman did look good overall. Like where he's on the train station and he's just like just beating and he's just like raging on that guy's face. It's like, okay, that's kind of cool. That's a brutal version of Batman that people had problems with in Batman v Superman, because Batman doesn't kill, and he doesn't kill in this movie, it seems. It's not as obvious that he does kill. And like the hallway sequence where they use the practical effects and have the bullets bouncing off of him and things like that, it looked quite cool. But every fight scene took too long, and they could have sped them up to help improve that time limit. And it was like, okay, Batman isn't a tank. He's not a fucking tank of a fighter. He is a trained fucking ninja. He's one of the world's best fighters. He's not going to stand there and just let people hit him and shoot him with guns. He's going to do everything he can to avoid that and to nullify that, so that it's just one hit done. Boom, thank you. Just show that in a sequence, because that'll look fucking cool. Simple. Even,
Agreed.
You know what? Guy Ritchie could probably do an interesting Batman movie. His penchant for, like in Sherlock Holmes, where he's sort of like, block, right jab, and go through. They could do something along the lines of that with a Batman sequence where he is working out every fucking angle on how to beat a room of 25 people, and you just suddenly see him go through it. Done.
You have my agreement. Look, this film's made a lot of money, been very successful. We're going to get more of it, and I can only hope it gets better.
Yep, agreed. Now, should we go on to Turning Red?
Turning Red. So this is we're moving right along. This is the new film from Pixar that's popped up on Disney Plus yet again, straight to Disney Plus, not going to cinemas. Apparently, the people who made it weren't happy.
No.
A 13-year-old girl named Maylin turns into a giant red panda whenever she gets too excited. This is an interesting film in the sense it is written and directed by an Asian American woman, written by all women, and obviously the protagonist is an Asian American girl and her Asian American family. She's sort of extending that kind of diversity thing that they're doing, particularly in Hollywood, and I know is a big deal at Pixar. That it's another underrepresented sort of minority in American society who's now getting, a film about them, a story about their world, which I liked.
Yeah.
The animation style is interesting. It's a little bit different to your standard Pixar animation. It reminded me very much of Aardman. The mouse looked very much like the mouse in something like Wallace and Gromit. I don't know if that's a deliberate choice, but I found myself quite often being reminded of Wallace and Gromit. That set is set in Toronto in Canada, which is interesting because usually their stuff set in the United States, and it's after Luca was set in Italy, so they're really stretching their wings a little bit. That's facetious. I struggled with this. And I got about halfway through it and said, I think that'll do. I found it kind of frustrating and annoying. And I found myself thinking that, we talked a little about this last year when Luca came out. We kind of felt like Pixar has an A and B team. And Luca looked very much like something done by Pixar's B team. And I think that might be the truth, because I feel like Encanto is A Pixar material.
It's not Pixar.
Yeah, same thing. Is Disney A material or Pixar Disney, whatever you want to call it? This is their B team.
Well, from what I understand, Disney Animation has butchered the creative talent from Pixar to improve that quality, and it's one of the reasons why Pixar movies go straight to streaming rather than cinema, because Disney want the prestige of having the best 3D animated movies rather than a division of Disney.
I don't understand why you'd have a separate division. Why wouldn't you just merge them? Pixar has a massive brand name now. Like,
Exactly.
Anyway, it's a
separate
corporation.
brand name that isn't Disney.
Like Disney Pixar is just, but everybody knows that they're almost interchangeable. I just found it really. The other part of it, I felt so. I feel like this is B Pixar team, like Luca, which I thought was B material, compared to say their A material. If we're going to go pure Pixar, the A material, something like Soul or In and Out or Up. That is A Pixar material. This is B Pixar material, and I feel like this again, like Luca, is targeted at a much younger audience than their films used to be. Like even so the Toy Story films, the first 3 at least, were made. They're kids films, but an adult can enjoy them every bit as much. It didn't feel like kids films. This feels like a kids film to me. What do you think?
I kind of liked it, but I feel like I would not be surprised, considering everything that's been going on recently with Disney and Don't Say Gay and things like that, and the controversy around a same-sex kiss that's supposed to happen in Lightyear coming out later, and it being removed and now being reinstated. Looking at this movie, I feel like this should have been Disney's first lesbian story, because the relationship between Mei Lin and I think it's Miriam, it feels like it should have been a gay story, because their relationship is wonderful and it just feels like Saturday afternoon cartoon boxed instead. And I feel like it's a real missed opportunity, because it's supposed to be a metaphor for maturity and growing and dealing with everything that happens when you suddenly hit puberty. And the relationship that Mei Lin has with her 3 best friends is really lovely. But it feels like, particularly with her best friend, I think it was Miriam, it feels like they're pushing a kind of a romantic relationship there, which I'm all in for. If they're going to go, oh, no, they're not. All right. Okay. Wait, this is really vapid in the end. And particularly how the grandparents and the aunties and things like that, it strangely, considering it's about expressing previously marginalized communities and ethnicities, they seemed strangely racially stereotypical. And it's like, okay, I don't quite know what you're going for here.
I felt the same way. It felt like, I mean, fairness, like I said, I watched half of it. Wouldn't get any further than that. Like, which is actually rare. Like, I sat all the way through Near Dark and I didn't like it. But this, I couldn't get through the second half of this. But you're right. Like, the setting of they lived out next door to a temple. Where they worship their ancestors and stuff like that, which is, yes, in some Asian cultures, that's obviously an important part. At Southeast Asian cultures, I'm assuming they're of Chinese descent, I think.
Red panda is a Chinese symbol, I think.
So I'm assuming it's, I mean, what do I know? That was my vibe. It came across as that, but it did feel like this is very cliche. Like, you want to tell a story about, I'm calling it Asian Americans, they're Asian Canadians, my bad. Asian Canadians, modern Asian Canadian family. The idea of them living behind a shrine, which they take care of and, take people's tours through, seems probably not very close to the existence of the vast majority of people in that community. And I understand I'm a white guy from a different country making a judgment call on that, so take that for what it is. But it does seem to be ticking a lot of cliche boxes. Like,
even the stereotype of Mei Lin, she's sort of like, she's a straight A student that works really hard and diligently, and all that.
The mother's a tiger parent who pressures her to do better and doesn't understand it. It goes around and follows her to school and hates her overbearing grandmother. It's just like, it does feel like a lot of cliches. Wouldn't it have been more representative and more interesting to tell a story about an Asian Canadian family where she's married to a white dude? and their mum works too hard. Like mum's a lawyer and never hangs out with her daughter, and pays no attention to what her daughter does at school, which is a complete reversal of that cliche of a tiger parent. But they've decided to go, and you're right, they have really gone down a very cliche path with this.
And maybe that's the story that they just wanted to tell, but Pixar can do better, and they've done better. And this, to me, this just it felt like this should have been, after Luca, this should have been their sort of like, okay, yep, A-Team's back on it, we're going to swing for the fences, and they really played it safe. Like, people kind of mock Cars 2 and Cars 3 for being the safest, most boring, unapproved Pixar movies, but this is pretty safe.
Safe is the word. It just got lazy.
Yeah, and no disrespect to the animation, because the animation is stunning. It's the detail on Mei Lin when she's in panda form and things like that. It looks beautiful. It's an unusual art style. You're right. It's a deviation from the typical aesthetic of a Pixar animation, but it still looks beautiful. The world feels complete in their animation, and the characters and the way things work just fits. It feels organic, but just the story is single note.
Maybe it makes sense if you're what you're saying is true. The best people from Pixar, and Pixar has almost been treated like a developmental territory. Like for a sporting contest, like. Yeah, I know what a big fan of British football you are.
Of course,
such a huge fan of what Long Melford Soccer Club gets up to on a regular basis.
Represent.
It's almost like Division 1, or what do they call it? And then Disney, if Disney's now been treated as the Premier League, if you will.
Yeah.
The newer people, or the less talented people, if you will, stay in Pixar, and the really high performing people get funneled up to the Disney animation division. That would kind of make sense why their recent output, apart from Soul, has been kind of meh. I mean, it's still good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I guess I'm saying it's good despite the fact I couldn't finish it. I feel like if you're a young audience, like young girls in particular, are probably going to really dig this, because it's really playing into their wheelhouses. They're going to really understand the story, and the themes are going to be a lot more relevant to them than to us. But I think that's also betrays its weakness, in the sense that their films didn't used to be like that. A film like Up, or a film like Inside Out in particular was aimed at it was made for younger people, because it was about a young girl, if I recall correctly. But that didn't matter. It didn't matter, but it was telling people, it had a message for younger people growing up, and about how their emotions mature and so on and so forth. But that didn't matter. It was still a fucking great movie that everyone can enjoy. What we're finding, I feel now, is they're making stories that are aimed at a younger audience, which aren't translating to outside of that group quite as well.
What's interesting for me is Domi Shi, who is the director of this. She also directed the short Pixar movie Bao, which is about the mother who finds a dumpling ball that ends up kind of becoming her baby, and growing and developing, and it's this beautiful, pretty much silent short about the disconnect of a mother and child, and how that relationship changes over time. And that was meticulous, beautiful, cried, wonderful. And apparently this is her, she's a member of the Canadian Chinese descendant population, and this is all about her childhood growing up in Toronto. But the passion and the emotion and the maturity that was shown in that short movie is just not here in this feature length. And maybe that's by design. Maybe she just wanted to have something that a young person that was her growing up would be able to connect to, and see her own representation as I think she's about 10 or 12 years old in the movie, just someone for them to latch onto as a representation. And it's like, well, fuck you if you're older. This isn't a movie for you. Maybe that's the case, but it just feels like they missed a lot of opportunity because it's a ripe area for that mature content to be put in intelligently, which, as you say, Inside Out is a prime example of a girl going through puberty and how it affects her. They've done that story. They could do it again with a very different twist, but they don't.
I think you've said it all there. I think if you have a young family, young kids are going to dig it. You might find it inoffensive. I found it dull and annoying, but I could see that I was kind of putting that, as I said, down to me being old and boring and not being in the target audience for this film. But my disappointment is that didn't matter once upon a time with Pixar, but I think it does increasingly now matter. Disappointing. And I don't know if it I don't know what the Asian Canadian or the Asian American and the Asian Australian community make of it. I'm sure they're glad to see themselves represented on screen, but I thought it had a lot of flaws for me.
Yeah, maybe Pixar is a victim of their own success. We do expect a higher caliber from something that has the Pixar name on them, but at the same time, it's been a hot minute since a Pixar movie really grabbed you by the balls and made you feel. So I feel like Disney has done some big damage to Pixar as a brand.
Well, they got the most out of them. They wrung every possible drop out of them before they did it.
That's true.
Speaking of wringing things out, can I move on?
Please do.
Talk about Picard.
Picard. Oh no, that is not a good lead-in.
This is an interesting one. So, I don't know. Have you watched any of it?
None of season 2.
So, I, those who don't know, when I was in high school, I was a big Trekkie. Star Trek Next Gen was my jam. And I still think that's the best series of Star Trek we've done. Probably about season 3 for about 6 is the best Star Trek's ever been.
Yep.
I stay up really fucking late to watch it when it was on TV here in Australia. It was on like at 11:30 at night on a Thursday. I'd be so fucking tired for school the next day, but my goodness, it was worth it. So when they announced they were going to do a new Picard series, I was equal sort of portions excited, but at the same time, kind of careful, I guess you'd say, or cautious. Because the people behind Star Trek these days don't like Star Trek and purely see it as a vehicle to basically sell their political message. Look, I'm a political person. That's cool. But they do it. And I'm cool with it. Star Trek has inherently always been political in a way, or it was the first interracial kiss was ever in Star Trek. The original series was dealing with some fairly heavy political messages. And I don't have a problem with that, except that Alex Kurtzman has no idea how to fucking do that. And not in a skillful, nuanced, intelligent way. So Star Trek Discovery has been turned into a gigantic shit show. Below Decks is like the fucking dollar store Rick and Morty, it's people tell me I like it. I'm like, fuck off, it's terrible. It's terrible. Everything Kurtzman has done Trek-wise has been terrible. He's destroyed the franchise, in my opinion. And the first season of Picard was fucking woeful. I don't know. You go back to 2020, you can probably mid-2020, you can probably find a show where I dissected it and we gave it a lot. I don't think you enjoyed it very much either, if I recall correctly.
No, I held out hope, thinking maybe they'll be able to do something good at the end, and no, they didn't.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. And interestingly, I don't know that it was the politics that really cut it out. Like, it was just a terrible story, terrible actors, and just again, Kurtzman doesn't like Trek. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand why people like it. That's why the Orville is the best Star Trek show on television at the moment, and I'm very excited about the new season. Here's the interesting thing: season 2 is a lot better.
Okay,
it's better. in that it's tolerable,
Okay.
passable.
That's
It's
progress.
at times mildly enjoyable.
Okay.
That's as opposed to just mind-bogglingly, stupidly dull as the first season. Stupid first, it's incomparably awful. The first season was terrible. Like it was awful. And the season 2 is kind of going okay. Well, interestingly, a lot of people apparently liked it. I don't know why, but
Okay.
you know, its reviews weren't terrible. You know, the audience got a 7.5 on IMDb. People apparently dug it. Enough people dug it, but for whatever reason, they've kind of pivoted away from that kind of storytelling that they were doing in season 1 to tell a different kind of story now, and they've brought back a fan favorite character in Q, the kind of interdimensional being with sort of crazy powers, who played by brilliant John Delancey. And I think most proper Trek fans were, TNG fans in particular, Star Trek and Next Generation fans, were big fans of John Delancey's character, and the characters, the episodes where he appeared with were some of the highlights. And he was a key protagonist in the Next Generation timeline, and he was in episode 1, and he was in the last episode, All Good Things. He's looking very old, which is not surprising, but so in this season 2, he has come back to torment Jean-Luc Picard some more, and he's hinting that so for those who don't know, the crew of the Enterprise were put on trial in episode 1, Encounter at Farpoint, in season 1, episode 1 of Star Trek Next Generation. And they were put on trial for the crimes of humanity and for being horrible and violent and yada yada yada. At the end of the series, in the last episode of season 7, All Good Things, they are back. Their trial comes back around, and they basically, Q comes back and says, "Well, let's have a look at how you actually performed over the last 7 years." And that's kind of nicely bookends the series. He's come back again to sort of go, "Hey, well, you know, I never said the trial was over, so you're now back on trial again for being horrible and human and all those good things." And he transfers them. He using his superpowers and snapping his fingers. He transports both Picard and somehow inexplicably most of the rest of the gang from the first season into an alternate timeline where the Federation isn't the Federation, it's the Confederation, and is this awful dictatorship of militaristic dictatorship where the Federation and humanity has basically conquered the universe, and you know they are brutally conquered and subjugate the rest of the known universe and kill people and have public executions and stuff like that. And Johnny Picard is like the head warmonger. And so back this season we have Alison Pill as Agnes Jurati, Santiago Cabrera as Cristobal Rios, Michelle Hurd as Raffi, Jerry Ryan as Seven, who is the president of Earth. And I think that we have a very brief appearance from the girl who played Raj, or the perfect girl from last season. I forget her name.
Soji.
Soji. And like she was in one scene and you're like, oh, thank God she's not coming back for a whole series. She was terrible in the last season. Eva Gore plays Eleanor, is back briefly. There's Space Legolas. Seriously. It's now again, they don't really explain why some of his friends are transported into this alternate universe, but they are. Here we start to encounter what's not so great about this. There's also a subplot I forgot about with the Borg Queen as well, which is just crazy. And they are forced to escape this, nightmarish Earth, as in Picard and Seven, with the Borg Queen to try and get away and fix the timeline. Is the idea. What's happened is that something has happened in the past. They need to go back in time to fix whatever this is that's caused the timeline to skew off and create this horrible nightmarish version of Earth. I'll get back to my point. Here's where we start to have a problem. Sorry.
So far, so Back to the Future Part 2.
Very Back to the Future Part 2. But and you're getting on you're on the right track. This is okay. This is cool. This is kind of interesting. This is kind of entertaining. But it is nothing we haven't seen before. And specifically, it's nothing we haven't seen before on Star Trek. The plot of it is basically yesterday's Enterprise.
Yeah.
Which is a great episode of Star Trek Next Generation. I think was the inspiration behind the script that the pitch that Tarantino gave the studios for his Trek film that was they put a writer's room together for and did nothing with. Like, why would you want a Star Trek film based on one of the greatest writers and directors of the last 30 years? Like, fuck that.
Silly.
But I think that was what his pitch was about. Yesterday's Enterprise. Like, I won't go into Trek detail about what that is, but and they did it in the original series as well. Like, Kirk was and Spock were transported to like an evil version of the universe in a different timeline. So it's been done. Well, the characters that are cool again. Q's come back, cool, but we've seen that to death. We have the crew being transported back to the early 21st century to try and fix a timeline. Well, I don't remember if we specifically ever had to go back in time to fix a timeline before, but the Star Trek crew having to go back in time to the present day to do stuff, we've been there. Star Trek 4.
Involving the Borg as well. I feel like that might have been done.
That was done in First Contact. It's them traveling back in time with the Borg and just back in time to the present day has been done a lot. Like I said, they did it in an episode of the original series, City on the Edge of Forever. They definitely did it in Deep Space Nine. I think they might have done it in Voyager. A bit vague on those ones, but like it's them traveling back in time to the present day solidly has been done, and most importantly on Star Trek 4. And in fact, the most recent episode actually has them riding the bus, and the punk from Star Trek 4 with the tape deck is in it. If you remember Star Trek 4 well enough, there's a scene with Kirk and Spock on the bus of a punk who's playing a loud boombox. And Spock.
Interesting continuity on that particular character. It was about 6 days after the sequences where he gets is in those Star Treks that he actually gets accosted by the Terminator and killed and taken all his clothes.
That guy was actually an assistant producer, and he wrote and performed the song on the boombox.
Okay.
And it's the same guy.
Okay.
Which is I guess it's kind of a nice, I got it. I'm like, I see what you're doing, and that's kind of cute, but it just kind of piles on top of what this show is for me. And I'm like, everything that's good about it comes from somewhere else. It's not creating anything new. It's not doing anything we haven't seen before. It's doing nothing new. Everything is a callback or an Easter egg or a throwback or a reference or a repeat or a reusing of something we've seen done better in a previous Star Trek series or show or movie. And that worries me in the sense that, like, this is pure member berries. Distilled as purest form for Trekkies. Like, everything's a member berry. And, like, I'm just like, guys, I get it. You really this is kind of maybe an apology for that garbage first season, but, like, when are you going to do something different? Like, have you got an interest? Have you got an original idea in here in your head at all? Or is it all going to be throwbacks and references or redoing stuff that's been done before with a different set of characters in a different Trek series? You see what I mean? Like, they're not building anything new. You'll get this. It's like the WWE these days. They don't create new stuff anymore. Everything, like, fucking Steve Austin, I think, is wrestling at WrestleMania this weekend. Like, at least he's supposed to be. He's doing an appearance at least. Like, what
they're doing with Brock Lesnar at the moment seems to be like a weird variation of Steve Austin. So,
and he's not. It's like supposed to be Kevin Owens or something. I don't know. But it's a bit WWE to use a wrestling. It kind of reminds me because it struggles in the ratings. I think these days because everyone kind of looks at it and goes, "Yeah, it was better 30 years ago, and you're not doing anything new." And that's kind of where we are with Picard for me. It's like I said, it's not terrible. It's a lot better than the first season for me. I'm not actively hating it. I'm just kind of going, "Have you got anything new?" And the answer so far is no.
Okay. Well, It'll be interesting to see if they stick the landing for this season, because I held out hope for most of season 1. But then by the end, when Picard dies and comes back
As a robot.
nope, no thank you.
We'll
Yeah.
see.
We'll see. All right, well, I'm just going to quickly talk about the new Netflix and Ryan Reynolds special movie, The Adam Project. So this is I think the penultimate movie that we will see from Ryan Reynolds for a little while, because he's taken a bit of a hiatus. I think he's got a movie coming out later on with Will Ferrell, and he said that he's taken a bit of a breaker and then coming back with Deadpool 3. This is directed by Sean Levy, who has been producing some and directing some pretty popular stuff recently. Obviously, he is one of the big producers behind Stranger Things. He produced Arrival for more of that kind of Oscar fare. He did Shadow and Bone on Netflix. He's done... he produced Cheaper by the Dozen. He did Free Guy again with Ryan Reynolds recently. He has definitely found his niche, which is 80s and 90s nostalgia, because The Adam Project is, after accidentally crash landing in 2022, a time-traveling fighter pilot Adam teams up with his 12-year-old self for a mission to save the future. And it is full of those typical tropes and expectations that you get from a Sean Levy movie now and a Ryan Reynolds movie now, where there's like, oh, that's a lightsaber. Oh, it's not a lightsaber. And then it operates exactly like a lightsaber and things like that. It's got a competent cast. It's got Ryan Reynolds in the lead with a new guy I've never seen before called Walker Scobell, who plays young Adam. And he has a really tough job of being a young version of Ryan Reynolds, and everyone who cares about Ryan Reynolds now only wants Ryan Reynolds, so he has to somehow be a young Ryan Reynolds, and he is not as charismatic as Ryan Reynolds, so it comes off just annoying. You've got Mark Ruffalo playing Lewis Reed, who is Adam's father and the godfather of time travel in this universe. Jennifer Garner, she plays their mum. Zoe Saldana is Ryan Reynolds' love interest, who's gone missing. You've got Catherine Keeler playing Maya Sorian, who is, spoilers, I guess, the bad guy, but that's really not surprising whatsoever. And then you've not really got anyone else that you're going to particularly know. For a Netflix movie, it's not bad. It's the same vein as like there was I talked about it earlier on. I went back and rewatched The Goonies, and this is very much trying to be a sci-fi modern variation of that kind of story, where it's sort of like, oh, this young kid who just does this thing is put into this exorbitant, unusual scenario. It's a little bit like we talked about Explorers a couple of months ago now. That kind of family-friendly, parents will find it fine, kids will find it fun and engaging, but it really is not punching above its weight in any way, shape, or form. It knows exactly the parameters that it wants to abide by, and it does that perfectly. It colors within the lines every single time perfectly. It's as if a computer has created the most average, safe, generically fun movie that it can. And considering the very fluctuating quality of Netflix exclusive movies, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it does bring the grade point average up. Ryan Reynolds is his typical charismatic, charming self. Zoe Saldana is her typical sexy, powerful, independent woman. Jennifer Garner is her typical loving mother, and Mark Ruffalo is his typical science guy. So everyone is playing that stereotype 100%. It does nothing bad, and it does nothing good. It just does it fine.
It just is. It just exists.
Yeah, but like I say, the special effects are fine. The action sequences are okay. Apparently, Ryan Reynolds and Sean Levy seem to like working together. They did Free Guy, now they've done this, and Sean Levy has been put up as he's going to be the director for Deadpool 3, which will be a bit of an interesting take for him, considering what people expect of Deadpool as a character with that much more adult-orientated material. Sean Levy has done pretty much nothing but family fare as a director. Just looking at some of his stuff, like I think he did Real Steel, that robot boxing movie with
Hugh Jackman
a while ago, and he just brings up most of his producing stuff here. First off, here we go. He did Date Night, which is possibly his most mature movie. Even then, it's not particularly mature. The Internship, Night at the Museum. He did some Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Nothing. He did the Pink Panther. But it's very, very safe stuff that he's made. So going into Deadpool, interesting. We'll see what he does with it, because he kind of feels like this generation's Joe Johnson, where he's kind of dial a director. Let's get him in. He'll do it. He'll do it under budget, and it'll be.
You know what you're getting.
Yeah.
Which is why I keep looking at this film on Netflix when I'm bored and going, I feel like I've already seen this.
You probably have.
This is like every Netflix film ever. It's like, get yourself 4 or 5 name stars, maybe 1 AAA star, and just to make whatever, because people have already paid for their Netflix. So watch it.
Yeah, pretty much.
They get bored on Saturday night. They can't pick up what to watch. They always watch the thing with the person they know.
Yeah.
And that's just how we end up with so much boring content being made by them. Like, it's interesting that the film that won Best Picture at the Oscars this week was being distributed by Apple.
That's right. Yeah.
So, Netflix has some competition now. So I don't know. Yeah. I think this is a negative trend. Like, I guess there's a lot of stuff being made these days, but like, and that's a good thing. But like, most of it's Drek like this. And I guess I haven't seen it, so I shouldn't say it's Drek, but like, it looks pretty dull.
It's not Drek at all, but it kind of feels like the very typical type of movie that is shake and bake. It's like, oh, we've got this idea. Let's just do this. Let's just work it for 6 weeks, and we don't need there's not a big cast in it. It's minimal, so we can probably actually still shoot this and be quarantine safe. And it's Ryan Reynolds' new movie, so we'll get a new bunch of people sign up to the membership. We'll release it just after we do a price increase, so that people don't care. They feel like they're getting new content. It'll be fine. That's their business plan.
Yeah, not interested.
Makes sense on a business level, but it's not good for the industry.
Like I said, they've already paid for their Netflix, so I don't think this is going to get people to sign up. It's the kind of thing that's going to rack up big numbers of things that people watch. Like, people watch terrible things on Netflix. Like, I noticed a show that's been in the top 10 in Australia for a while. Was an airline show. It was about a plane that disappeared and.
Oh, Manifest.
Manifest. And I thought, this is obviously not new. This is not being made by Netflix.
No.
This is a zombie TV show.
Netflix.
Sorry?
It's been saved by Netflix.
Saved by Netflix. And I think they're making another season now. Some network made a season or 2, cancelled it, and then they've just come along and bought it. Yep. And all of a sudden it's found a home on Netflix, which, in a way is a good thing for some shows, but it's never the good shows. Like, it's always crap like Manifest. Like, I watched 2 episodes of it. I'm like, this is like the bastard child of Lost and Fringe, and then two shows I don't particularly care for, and then someone like surgically removed all the good stuff from those shows, and then they had like this, and and there's not much good stuff to go around for me, but like I know you really like Fringe, but like it's really, really lazy and crap TV, but people obviously watched it, but so people will watch whatever's on there, because they're paying for it.
Mm-hmm. Next week, I will be talking about. I'll finally get around to watching Red Notice, which is the other Ryan Reynolds Netflix one with Gal Gadot and The Rock. So I have a sneaking suspicion that is going to be yet another paint by numbers movie.
If you're going to cracking over 2 hours now, I mean, if you haven't got anything else to say particularly about this one, I just want to cover off something else that's really, really average before we leave for the evening. Just to save you some time, I did this, in the last few weeks. Michelle and I sat down and finally decided on Prime to watch Old, the latest offering from M. Night Shyamalan. Have you seen it?
I have not. Not yet.
That is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay. A vacationing family discovers that the secluded beach where they're relaxing for a few hours is somehow causing them to age rapidly, reducing their entire lives into a single day.
Okay.
This is an interesting idea, executed rather poorly.
Okay.
And that kind of sums up the last 20 years of M. Night Shyamalan's career, bar maybe one or two here or there. Like, it's one idea, and that's all we've got. It's one interesting idea, and they're like, the rest of it, like, I don't know what else to write. We'll just fucking throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. And that is very much this film. We have a group of people who have found a very cheap offering to just have a stay at this very exclusive resort. They don't say where. Tropical resort, and they're all, oh my god, I can't believe it costs. They got to save so much money to come and stay at this uber luxurious resort, and we got it so cheap. Bum, bum, bum. Little do we know they've actually been picked to be part of some sort of nefarious experiment. They really should have someone with an eye patch and like a cape, like in this. Like, it would be awesome. We have
off. This kind of feels like the kind of story that you'd get in Tales from the Unexpected or one of those schlocky B-movie type, like Stranger Than Fiction kind of things.
You know what it would be? It would be a B-grade Twilight Zone story. Remember there used to be like the Twilight Zone knockoffs? Like there was the, what was the other one? You used to like it. George R. Martin. Limits. The Outer Limits, like the knockoffs of those ones. That said, though, even then, the stuff on that is better than most of the stuff you see on TV these days. But it would be like a half-hour segment on a show like that, and it would be cool. Or like Amazing Stories. Remember Amazing Stories?
Oh God, yeah, that was good.
But they maybe couldn't have quite done what they did in this because it's on TV. But anyway, you're right. So we have Gael Garcia Bernal, who has the most hilariously out-of-date IMDb picture of all time. Because you should see him how he looks now and compared to his picture, and he's about 20 years younger. His wife, Vicky Krieps, their children, played by Alex Wolff and Thomasin McKenzie. Thomas McKenzie, probably best known for Jojo Rabbit.
And she was also in one Last Night in Soho.
Yes, she was. That was a disappointing film that was. And we've got a cast of other people. The only one really noticeable name in here you'll recognize is Rufus Sewell, plays an an older gentleman named Charles, who's also a surgeon and a hospital administrator. We have a nurse, we have a model, and they all find themselves on this beach. Like, oh, wow, the people at the resort, it's this amazing isolated beach that no one goes to. We can pack some food for you and take you there, and etc. And they all agree to go, and they get down. They got to go through this big valley of through these giant cliffs to get down to the beach, and the van driver won't go with them. They get down there, and the beach won't let them leave.
Okay.
Whenever they try and leave, they like pass out and find themselves waking up like back down on the beach. Oh, can I also mention there's also a semi-famous rapper who's on this tour as well, whose professional name is, I am not joking, Mid-Size Sedan. Like his character's name is
Just so,
mid-sized sedan.
just so that I definitely heard that right. Mid-sized sedan.
Yes.
Okay.
What would they call it? A mid-sized coupe in the UK? Yeah, probably his professional name in the UK. But it's, and then as it sort of says on the box, they find that they're aging incredibly quickly. They're the children quickly before you know it. Some of them are quite small initially. They're older teenagers and young adults before they know it. They're having sex with each other. Not the brother and the sister. There's another teenager on the beach. It's not quite that bad. Rufus Sewell's Charles, he's dementia or Alzheimer's. They don't really say what it is. He sort of goes from 0 to 100 in a couple of hours, and he's accusing people of stealing from him, and he's stabbing. He ends up stabbing someone and being violent, which is, I understand, probably quite rare, I think, for people with those sort of conditions. But hey, whatever's. They can't get out. They can't close. There's huge cliffs. They're surrounded by huge cliffs. They can't climb. There's the bay. They try and swim out. They can't swim out because reasons.
So with the aging, is it that they're kind of experiencing rapidly as well, or are they just suddenly like the kid is
The second one, like they'll turn around 5 minutes ago, he was a 10-year-old. Now he's a 15-year-old.
Wow. Okay.
The logic kind of plays fast and loose.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they kind of, like, you can imagine that for the body to get literally physically bigger, it would need, quite a bit of fuel. Like they do give them quite a bit of food, but like with that passage of time, like they don't need to be eating quite as much as you think they would, and stuff like that. It's kind of weird, and like it doesn't really make sense. Like their hair doesn't grow, their nails don't grow, but everything else does, and it's like the blackouts aren't ever actually explained. Like I said, they try and walk back out the valley they came down in, and they just black out, and then they find themselves back on the beach again. But no one actually says, "Oh shit, I found you back there and I dragged you into here." Like they just appear in the middle of the beach. The blackouts aren't actually explained. It doesn't make a lot of sense, I think.
Apparently, it's based on something called Sandcastle by Pierre Oscar Levy.
Is that a comic book? I think it might be, if I read correctly. The book, yes, it's a book. Yeah, graphic novel. I haven't read it. Obviously, maybe it's got a better story than this. This kind of, it's not the worst film Shyamalan's made, but that's not a very high bar. Like, it's actually a pretty low bar considering some of the direct he's been involved in. This is probably, I would say, the bottom half of his work, in the sense, if you line them all up against the wall, this would be towards the lower end of the stuff he's done. Like, this is poor.
Okay.
It's not that graphic. There is a little bit of violence. There's some, suggested sexual situations. It's utterly predictable, like completely predictable. For the most part. And its resolution is kind of ridiculous.
Okay. Is it the Dallas ending?
Sorry?
Is it the Dallas ending?
What's the Dallas ending?
It's all a dream.
Not quite that bad. It's more like I don't want to give any spoilers, but it's kind of like it's very convenient.
Okay.
I mean, let's face it, we all know you're going to predict at the start of a film what happens at the end of a film. Well, what happens if someone escapes from the beach, who they'll be. You can probably pretty quickly figure out who that is. And when it does happen, you kind of like, yeah, okay, I saw that. And it's very convenient what happens subsequent to that. And then the people, it just so happens to be a policeman at the resort. And, someone escaped. And, oh, my God, it's a terrible experiment. Let me call my colleagues, the other police in a different country, and they'll just listen to me. So, yeah, it's I would probably say, look, if you've got Prime and you're a big fan of Shyamalan, you might get something out of it. But I think it could be, and 2 hours spent better somewhere else.
Well, I was just going to say, at least it's less than 2 hours.
That's true. That's on its plus side. It doesn't overstay its welcome, but at the same time,
it wasn't really
it's
welcome.
not very good.
All right. Well, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. I think that's the end of our show for this week. We talked about our current chain movie, Near Dark. Travis is using the legendary Bundy Chinook as the connective tissue to barbed wire. Thank you very much for that, Travis. I talked about the pirate movie. We talked about Batman, the Atom Project, Turning Red, Picard, and we finished up with Old. And Siren gave us this week's recommendation from the audience, Thomas the Tank Engine and the Magic Railroad.
Excited. I'm excited.
It's going to be a fun time. But thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this week. We do apologize that it's been a bit temperamental for our releasing of stuff, but we will get to you as soon as we can each and every time we get together and actually do it.
Sometimes life just gets in the way.
Yeah, it has a habit of doing that. If the last 2.5 years have done anything, COVID couldn't stop us, but the rest of life can. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, and we will see you next time. Good night.
Night.